Hello and welcome to today's video. Every single Monday the content is chosen by you, the viewers, so if there is a song or an album you would like me to check out or review, then be sure to let me know in the comments section below and one will be chosen every single week. In today's video we'll be conducting an album analysis of the most recent album by the post-emo / pop punk band Hot Mulligan titled Why Would I Watch? The band have released a couple of albums over recent years, with Pilot in 2018 and You'll Be Fine in 2020, and they are a band that really like to focus on the personal side in their music, really drawing inspiration from life's events and their feelings, their emotions, and that really comes across quite strongly in their post-emo stylings. Also with the pop punk sound really as well, starting to really rise up again. It has gone underground over recent years, but with bands such as Blink-182 coming back, Sum 41 still releasing music, Neck Deep, and a variety of others that have been able to raise the prominence of the genre, we're starting to see a lot more focus and it become a lot more available, widespread almost amongst mainstream charts and things like that, and the band will certainly be hoping that they can do the same. So will this album prove to be one keeping an eye out for, or simply pass by blindly? Let's take a look at it track by track. Kicking things off, we do have Shouldn't Have a Leg Hole But I Do, a song that talks about poor mental health and coming to terms with its permanence, this idea that you can't really escape it, or for some people they don't feel that they can. And we get this really nice acoustic open really leading into the track before we do switch into the much more typical quick fire lyrical delivery that we do often see from Nathan and Chris, in the way they intertwine the lyrics as well and bounce between each other. And we can see from a couple of the early lyrics it really shows this tie to poor mental health. Every path, every variable made, so it'll bring me back. So no matter what path you take, no matter which way you go, you do have this constant drawback to this poor mental health state, and you feel like you've got this guilty fate as well. And we do get the typical smattering of these noodly guitars that really do come in, and we get these very quick pitted drums as well. Really shows a kind of a lot of consistency in the way they produce these tracks, really sticking with some of these strong elements that the band have really worked on over their past albums, and it also has a very strong flow into the following track, which takes us straight into It's a Family Movie, She Hates Her Dad. And this is a song that revolves quite heavily around the idea of alcoholism and addiction within families, and not wanting to become like other people, or the kids that have to grow up in these households and watch things actually unfold and occur, and how it can impact somebody growing up as well. And we do get more of these very playful guitars that really do come through, bouncing them around and really showing a lot of proficiency in the way they actually build a lot of these riffs in to kind of give it this more upbeat stylings, despite the very negative aspects that we do have included in the lyrics. And straight from the get-go we have the line blackout, touching on this idea of passing out from alcohol or addiction to certain medicines and things like that. And it talks about this broken family, the idea of stay together for the kid being one of the lyrics. And we do get more of this beautiful switching between Nathan and Chris, something they do across the course of the entire album to really help to break things up and really show a bit more depth in the music that they do produce. We also get this really beautiful layered outro that really comes in, and these two songs so far certainly show a lot of likeness to some of their previous works from previous albums, and it doesn't show too much development in their sound. It's more like them sticking with exactly what they know how to do. Then for track 3 we do have And I Smoke, which talks about anxiety and this idea of all eyes being on you, even in an empty room, this feeling almost of claustrophobia and things like that. And it does open with this much more prominent bass, starting to see something a little bit different from the band and really just playing on not making every song sound exactly the same. And we do get a lot of lines that really emphasize the meaning that's behind it. I hear a voice from an empty room make small talk, this idea that you feel like there's voices around, just people around you when there aren't. My senses flare at the drop of a pin, I'm alone. So it really shows this simple idea of feeling like there's something all around the corner, something lurking with your senses flaring, despite the fact that you are basically on your own in a room. And we do get more of this very cutthroat delivery, something the band do quite heavily, with these very short snappy lyrics that really do come through. And we also get probably one of my favourite most beautiful musical instrumental interludes that do come in towards the end, later stages of this track, really showing again the proficiency of the band members in their abilities to craft a lot of these riffs and a lot of these playful elements that really add to the band's sound. Then for track 4 we do have probably one of the biggest tongue twisters going. This song is called It's Called What It's Called. Try and say that 3 times fast probably would be quite difficult. This is a song that kind of takes the band on a personal journey in looking back with mixed emotions on their tune to simpler times when they played in basements and things like that. And we do see it open with this switch into a softer tone, much more reflective and much softer in the way that it's actually delivered. But then we do see this switch up into this more aggressive cutthroat sound. This idea from some of the lyrics of can't get it back, oh there's so much I would change. Really looking back on this nostalgia that they do have and seeing one side of it with this softer sounding music that almost is quite reminiscent, and then we do go into this more aggressive side that kind of looks at the more negative aspects, which again ties in beautifully with their emo sound that they do like to include. A lot of their songs have to build in this negativity, but this style, switching styles, really helps to reflect the mixed emotions that the band are trying to convey. We also get the great use of keys in this track and the backing vocals as well, which I think was a really strong and subtle element that mimics touring and being on stage. It's this idea of the crowd shouting back, so looking back perfectly on the message that this track is trying to convey. Next up, we do have No Shoes in the Coffee Shop or Socks. It was one of the songs that was released as a single from this album, and again touches on this idea of nostalgia and how it can keep you up, because you can look at things in the past and they can keep you awake at night. I'm sure this is quite a relatable song as well, where you can be there lying there at 2 in the morning and suddenly you think about this one simple thing, then your mind can't switch off from that. Makes great use of these sharper, shorter sounds and really shows through the lyrics this kind of being stuck in your own head. The question that came next is if my memories lead to stark regret. So these memories that turn or can be twisted from having a more positive feeling to something more negative because you think of the other side of that memory. But it does have a great hook in the chorus of this track, for every crater on the moon. It's the way it's delivered. Certainly it has a sharp opening to the chorus that really gets stuck and ingrained in your head, and you kind of find yourself kind of repeating it a couple of times after you have listened to it. So a great hook that is actually included in the chorus, but kind of again showing a lot more of what the band have done from previous tracks and previous albums, very limiting themselves on the style and the sound. Moving into the next track, we do have Christ Alive, My Toe, Damn It Hurts. I don't know where they get these titles from. It's like they just throw them into a word generator and see what comes up. And this is a song that kind of explains the feeling of suicidal thoughts, but it does it in a very interesting way. It has a very upbeat sound to the track, which really makes it feel quite positive despite, again, these negative connotations, because I feel like I'm dying, oh, I hope I'm dying. I mean, a couple of lyrics that are included, but by mixing it in with these more upbeat sounds and the heavy negative nature, it really adds a very jarring mix to the track. And they also make great use of the screams in this track to add to these painful thoughts that they do have, kind of wanting to no longer be alive. So I kind of like these songs like this where they make use of those more aggressive, almost top end or close to screams that they do include in some of their tracks, because it really helps to add to that more emotive sound that they're trying to capture that many of the other bands in the same genre aren't able to achieve quite as well. Next up, we do see the band slam on the brakes with Betty, a song all about the death of a pet, believe it or not, called Betty. Got her ashes from the vet today, so we can really see that. And one thing I really do like, a very simple trick they use in this track that I really enjoy, is the use of whistling, almost like calling out to an animal. It's something you don't often get to see, but I like how they make that simple little choice that a lot of pet owners can imagine, this idea of trying to whistle to your dog or cat, whatever animal it is, to come to you, unless it's a tortoise and it might take a little bit longer. But I really do like this acoustic break in the middle of the album. It just stops it just being kind of 30-40 minutes of just raw screaming and shouting in your face, and just kind of breaks up the aggression a little bit, gives you a chance to have a little bit of a breather. Next, we move into Cock Party 2, Better Than the First. So trying to improve on a previous track, and it touches on the idea of losing touch with old friends. When did we stop laughing, feel sorry for us now? And I think a lot of people can relate to this track, because you'll have friends from your childhood that you gradually distance yourself with over time because you move on and life takes over. So it's a song that's very relatable to a lot of people. And one thing I really do like that you do in this track is make great use of layered vocals and harmonies, again between Chris and Nathan, to really show this idea of this disconnect between two people. Occasionally they'll layer them over, then that's the way they can kind of show this connection between two people, but they'll have other points in the track where they have one to the other, so kind of bounce like a tennis match, bouncing between the two to really show this gap, this distance. So I like these great little effects they did use, and also adding in these softer elements with this gradual build through the track, so keeping it much softer but again transitioning into their typical and common sound. Next in the album, we do have Shhh, Golf Is On, which was the lead single that was taken from this particular album, and it's a very negative track. There is a lot of hate built into it, because it's about wishing ill on a family member or loved one. Again, from that very personal perspective from the band, it really helps to add to that aggression, that emotive style that they really do love to include. The shame that I have to look like mom, disgraced I made me my father's son. So it's actually talking about one of the band members and how much they hate their mother for the person they've become, but you can see through this album a lot of the elements they've touched on, the idea of this alcoholism and things like that. So you can kind of see the reference to a very broken and disjointed family, and you can see about it being about not becoming like that member of your family. We get this great use of recheck, change, recheck. It's about adjusting yourself, constantly looking in the mirror to make sure you're not becoming this person that you don't want to, that's in your family. You almost see that kids become their parents or things like that, so it's trying to avoid that. We also get some great use of the close to screaming vocals, again showing this aggression really coming through quite heavily. And one other thing I want to touch on is they make great use of the cowbell. It's an underrated instrument, but it gets a little bit of use in this track and it really stands out, and again just something quite thick in its sound that again adds to these more aggressive moments. Now, as we make our way towards the later stages of the album, we have Gans Media Retro Games. Only seeing what you're doing wrong is exactly what this song's about, and it's an interesting one because it does open with the chorus showing a little bit of a musical change, but it is one of those songs that unfortunately didn't quite stand out as heavily as many others on the album. It does have this constant lyrics that was I the problem, really showing this questioning attitude, kind of not being able to look past yourself and what you actually do. And we do get more short, stabby lyrics really coming in to kind of just show this confusion almost of this person not knowing if they're the problem or not, and not being able to see the more positive side. But we do get some really interesting lighter backing elements. It almost sounds like a bit like steel drums, but have been synthed up in the background or the backing layers of the track, which are quite standoutish, but unfortunately the track as a whole just doesn't quite cut to the same as the rest of the album. Then in at track 11 we do have Smahccked My Head Awf, and it's about a visit with an older loved one, someone that's really struggling. And I think this is a song again that can tie in with a lot of people. They can share the experiences maybe that they've gone through watching grandparents and things like that get older, and it is a topic they have touched on previously in songs such as Dirty Office Bongos and also Something About a Bunch of Dead Dogs. They've both been written about a certain band member's grandmother and this gradual development, and I kind of like they keep referencing to these ideas. It's almost like it's building a story across their albums, and it builds in with these softer guitars than this more prominent bass. And again, I like these more emotive tracks such as Betty and this, having that slightly more softer tone, that more emotive feel to them, and this idea of showing reassurance to a family member who's really struggling. It can tie in with the idea of dementia. You must have forgotten he died when I was 15, so this old family member who is no longer able to remember. And again, just you can really see the personal emotion that comes through on this track, and for anyone that can link in with the feelings and these ideas, it really does make it quite strong. But for people that aren't really as experienced with this, they kind of may feel that the track does fall slightly short. Then rounding out the album, we do have John, The Rock, Cena, Can You Smell What the Undertaker? It's again, just more bizarre tracks that do come in, and certainly in the titles. And this is a song all about the effects of Christianity and what it can have on young, impressionable people. The idea of the Holy Ghost keeps whispering, and it touches on the idea of things like body dysmorphia, how people can be adapted and kind of changed through religion. So it does focus on that quite heavily, and we do get a really nice fading outro to the album. But it's again another track that unfortunately didn't feel like it quite stood out. It kind of was a bit of a copy and paste of a lot of the instrumental sounds that we had seen previously across the album, and although it serves as a good outro, I don't think it would have worked with that too emotive kind of outro that we did see on the previous track. So I kind of like how they've gone back to their typical sound to kind of round out the album, but again another one that didn't stand out too heavily on this release. So overall, this is definitely an album that shows quite a bit of proficiency from a lot of the instrumental side of the band. Their ability to play with these noodly guitars, these very quick, pacey drums that come through on most of the tracks, and show a bit of variance in their style with the softer tones and then kind of playing back more towards the aggressive sounds as well. And I do like how they're kind of tying in some stories, the idea of the grandmother kind of having multiple tracks written about her to really show this development as she approaches closer and closer to the end of life. So I like how they really include the more emotive sound and style to their music that a lot of other bands in that same genre aren't quite able to do. The only thing I'm not overly conscious of the fact that it does have quite a lot of shared elements with their previous albums. They're not showing heavy amounts of development in their sound and style across these albums. It does feel like a little bit of copy and paste, and unfortunately, whilst they do the basics brilliantly and they really have stuck to their sound and style and really shown that they can do it, there aren't particularly any moments that heavily stand out as incredible moments. They're certainly just solid tracks with a lot of emotion packed in, rather than being these outstanding tracks that you really just want to spread amongst the world. So overall, I'm going to be giving this album a 7 out of 10. Whilst I feel it has got some strong emotive and musical elements, I just don't see it kind of reaching much higher than that towards an 8. I'd need to see a bit more development from the band and really show them continue expanding on their sound rather than kind of sticking to the cookie cutter style that they do know. And it can certainly be done. If we look at bands like Boston Manor, who started out with this more emo pop sound, and they've gradually developed their sound and become much stronger because they've been willing to step out of their comfort zone. And I feel like this is what the band needs to do on any future albums, really expand their sound, really show some development musically and also maybe a bit more emotively as well, and find some other things to kind of cover. But aside from that, I definitely think it's a solid album, but again, not one of the ones that is massively outstanding. So that will be everything for today's video, but as always, feel free to let me know your thoughts about this album in the comments section below, or let me know which of them is also your favourite. I would love to know your thoughts. Also, if you'd like to see more content like this, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.